Now, for the past couple of weeks, I've been using a camera product that has completely blown me out of the water, and that's a rare occurrence, certainly when it comes to a camera, and that is specifically the new Sony A7s Mark II. One of the crazy things about this camera is its feature sets. Firstly, it's based on the original A7s, which was a mind-blowing low-light photography and video camera that a lot of videographers and stills photographers really like because it gives you the ability to shoot really high ISO settings, to use natural available light, and have very, very minimal noise. And there was pretty much no other camera around that price range that could offer those amount of capabilities. It was 1080p. With the new A7s Mark II that we have over here, we now have full in-camera 4K capturing capabilities at 100 megabits per second. So I want to put the camera through its paces and to really understand if it's worth its $3,000 price tag, which is pretty steep for most people out there that are kind of beginning into videography and photography and are curious about a camera like this but are wondering if it's worth the price tag that it comes with. So here we're going to do a proper full review of the camera and investigate if it's worth owning. Now, the imaging sensor on the Mark II is pretty much identical to the original A7s. There's really no difference in terms of sensitivity and overall megapixels. You still have 12.2 megapixels, and each pixel on the sensor is about 8.4 microns in terms of size. With an ISO range of 50 to over 400,000 ISO, this is really a low light monster and is very hard to compete with both in terms of the stills and video world. Now, the shutter performance is actually pretty good on this camera. You can have up to 500,000 shutter actuation, so it's pretty durable. And in terms of maximum burst mode, you can go up to 5 frames per second in terms of the stills mode, and your maximum shutter speed is at 1/1/8,000th of a second. Additionally, the autofocusing system hasn't really changed from the original A7s. You still have around 169 autofocusing points, and all those points are contrast detection, and the autofocusing is fairly fast, perhaps not as fast as a proper hybrid autofocus camera, and certainly not as fast as a proper DSLR with phase detection autofocusing. Now, one of my absolute favorite physical features about this camera definitely has to be the electronic viewfinder. It has over 2.3 million dots, which is almost double the resolution of the main 3-inch display that is slightly articulating on the A7s Mark II. But the experience you get with the OLED EVF is absolutely fantastic. It's up there with an optical sensor in terms of latency and overall sharpness. It really does look like you're viewing the world through a natural lens rather through any kind of computers or electronic screen. Now, with the amount of video features you have on this camera, it's hard to believe that somebody would buy this just for the stills capabilities, but as a stills camera, it's very darn capable. Certainly the only thing bringing it behind is the megapixel count, but that's understandable once you start looking at the low light performance. Pretty much anything below 80 to 50,000 ISO is pretty darn usable. It's pretty amazing to see features and details that you can't even see with the naked eye, even once you've adjusted to the light. So the camera is actually superior to your eye when it comes to low light performance, which is pretty darn remarkable within itself. Now, even with 12 megapixels, there's still a lot of great detail that this camera can render out, and the color rendition is also quite fantastic. So even as a pure stills camera, especially if you do any kind of event photography where you need to use available light, this is a fantastic solution for those type of photographers. Now let's jump into the video capturing capabilities of the A7s Mark II. Certainly this camera is more geared toward that feature than the stills, in my opinion. Now, you do have a clean HDMI output, which is excellent if you want to do any kind of live streaming, or even if you want to use an external recorder to record your footage. Internally, of course, you do have a couple of different recording options. You can record 1920 by 1080 from 24 frames per second up to 120 frames per second. That's pretty darn incredible. There's really not a lot of cameras out there that have this 120 full HD capability, so you could do stuff like this in slow motion. Additionally, in terms of the actual 1080p capturing capabilities, you can have a bitrate of over 100 megabits per second with a 128 gigabyte SD card that's class 10 certified. So if you do have that, the bitrate is actually fantastic for color grading and indeed video editing. And speaking of color grading, you can also have the option to shoot in S-Log3 mode, where you get up to 14 stops of dynamic range and you have a very flat picture profile, giving giving you the most information in your shadows and your highlights. Obviously, judging exposure and everything like that when you're at this setting is a little bit tricky, but luckily you do have a preview mode that gives you more of a Rec 709 curve where you can judge your picture properly, but it's still recording in that S-Log3 mode, which is going to give you the most flexibility in post. Now, certainly one of the biggest selling features of the A7S Mark II is the in-camera 4K capturing capabilities, and just like the 1080p mode, you can shoot at 2 different bit rates if you have the right SD card. And what we're going to do now is jump ahead to the raw 4K footage that's coming straight out of this camera. This video is uploaded in 4K so you can view the actual quality of the camera straight through your eyes and judge for yourself on what the quality is like. Now, to kind of sum up everything we've talked about in this review, we're going to do a quick pros and cons list to really determine if this thing is worth owning. We'll start with the points that I didn't like about the camera. Firstly, in terms of its actual resolution when it comes to stills, most DSLRs in this category are well above 12 megapixels. They're in around 20 megapixels. So for proper stills photographers, this might be a limiting factor, especially if they want to blow up their image to large poster sizes and everything like that. And in most cases, it is a passable resolution for most web distribution, but I would understand that for proper exclusive stills photographers that do magazine work or any kind of proper high resolution photography, this might be limiting in that regard. Now, another issue is regarding the battery performance. I only got about 15 minutes on average when you're recording at full 4K resolution, which is definitely unacceptable if you're going to do long format interviews and things like that. And the batteries that it uses are about 1020 milliamp hours, very small capacity. Luckily, you do get 2 of them when you buy the camera, and you're obviously going to need some kind of external battery source to keep this thing running, especially if you're going to do long format interviews or something like that in full 4K resolution. Now, there is an APS-C crop mode when you're shooting in 1080p video, which is nice if you want to zoom in to a particular part of the video with having the full resolution, but sadly that's only in the HD setting. If you shoot in 4K, you do not have the ability to crop into the sensor for a tighter field of view or to use crop sensor lenses when you're shooting 4K. Now, I know this camera has an articulating screen at the back, but I would appreciate to have like a proper flip out screen you get on the Canon 70D and 60D, which is a lot more useful if you want to do selfies and things like that, and gives you a little bit more flexibility than the articulating screen we have on this camera. Furthermore, the library of full frame Sony lenses is pretty small compared to what you have with Canon and Nikon cameras, and although you can use any kind of manual full frame lenses because this is a mirrorless camera, adaptability is really not a concern in terms of those regards. And if you want native autofocusing capabilities, you're definitely going to have to depend on the Sony library of lenses, which again is fairly small and not as diverse as the ones we find on Canon and Nikon. Now, moving forward and talking about the stuff that I did like about the camera, firstly, it is a full 35mm sensor, so that's excellent if you do like to use manual lenses, Nikon lenses, and pop them on to this camera. Great, excellent fit, and you get that beautiful full frame look that a lot of people really love. And as we mentioned in the review, in terms of low light performance, this is up there with the original A7S. Although it's not much of an improvement from the previous generation camera, it's still a mind-blowing camera when it comes to low light performance. performance, and based on our tests, again, you can shoot in any available lighting condition and have very minimal noise. Another cool thing about the camera is that you can shoot in S-Log3 mode, so with that you have a decent amount of dynamic latitude, and you can also monitor that flat image in a normal Rec. 709 color profile, so you can gauge exposure and everything like that properly, and then you can color grade later on, which is definitely a nice thing. And of course, like any proper video camera, we do have a full microphone jack and a headphone jack, so you can monitor your audio and everything like that. And I'm recording this lapel mic directly into the camera, and as you can hear, it sounds pretty good. Now, additionally, this camera does also have built-in Wi-Fi, so you can do stuff like this, which is remote monitoring from the Play Memories app on your iOS or Android device. And this is great if you want to do stuff like this and monitor your video wirelessly. Even though there's a little bit of delay, it definitely helps because that screen isn't fully articulating, and you can gauge and stop and start recording, which is definitely handy. Furthermore, another handy feature is the built-in steady shot capabilities inside the body of the camera. So even if your lens does not have built-in stabilization, you can use that. And it, although it's not a miracle system to stabilize your footage, it's definitely better than not having it. Now, last but not least, besides the GH4, Blackmagic, and some of the other Sony cameras, there's really not a lot of cameras that have built-in 4K capturing capabilities. And in terms of low light performance and overall image quality and processing, this is probably the top camera you're going to get, especially if you want a compact DSLR form factor with a full-frame sensor. And although for around the same price, you can get that new mini Blackmagic Ursula camera that's going to come out hopefully soon enough. But again, that's a full large format camera that probably is nowhere near as good as this camera when it comes to low light performance and overall compact size. But really, we're going to have to find out. Hopefully we'll have the opportunity to do a full review and comparison between this camera and that Blackmagic camera soon in the future. But really, on that, guys, that's really it. Hopefully this video helped you out in some way. Definitely let me know in the comment section down below. Give us a thumbs up if you like this video, and I would really like to thank B&H Photo for supplying the A7S Mark II for our full review. If you want to get this camera or anything else, B&H is an excellent source, very competitive pricing, and outstanding customer service. Check out the link in the description down below for all that information. But really, other than that, thanks again for watching, and we'll see you later. Take care.